All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And I just noticed I was looking back, my camera was just a little cockeyed there, and I'm like, my mind is, you got to fix it. so, all right. Today I am here with Grace Clemens, and Grace, so awesome to have you today. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Me as well. Thank you so much for having me today.
You bet. You bet. And I want to give a shout out real quick to the folks at the podcast guest platform because man, they're doing such an amazing work there, and I have found some really amazing podcast guests through that platform. And of course, that's how you and I connected, Grace. And then when we had you and I had a Zoom call already, and I got to find out about what you do and all of that. And I'm just like, man, this girl is doing some amazing stuff. And today we caught you in Florida, and you're only there for a little bit before you're going and doing some other traveling. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. I don't know, but yeah, I just love the fact that it's you know doing what we do, we're kind of location independent. We can be wherever in the world we want. And you are a perfect example of that. I have some other friends of mine that are kind of like nomadic a little bit, and they travel all over. Me, I could, but I'm married. We have 7 children. We currently have 6 grandchildren. And my wife could not even imagine not seeing all of our kids and grandkids regularly. So we ain't going nowhere. so But what I'll do is, Grace, I'll start. I want to turn over to you to start. So I want to set a little bit of context. So I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the impact that you're making in the world. And let's start there and set a little bit of context and let the listeners know who you are.
Absolutely. So I am Grace Clemens. I'm a marketing lead of 13 years. I've been a digital marketer from day one. And I've worked in B2B, B2C. I've worked in nonprofit, e-commerce, the hospitality industry, travel, you name it. There really hasn't been an industry that I haven't tried out. But now, today, fast forward 13 years, I'm currently working on launching a marketing agency, freelance as well, while I'm focusing on digital marketing audits for e-commerce brands. And that kind of leads into the strategy that I do as well. So that is what I'm currently offering right now. Obviously, if anyone who is not an e-commerce brand would like a digital marketing audit, I can absolutely do that for you. But in terms of messaging and who I'm currently speaking to, it is e-commerce brands. And I'm currently offering a free 15-minute audit on your social media channels, just to give you kind of a taste. What's the big difference between that and a paid audit is really the back end data. In the full audits that I do, I go into the back end of third-party data and every platform known to social media, and go in there and really do a deep dive in terms of where are the opportunities, where are missed opportunities, where can we improve revenue and engagement and customer loyalty. And then I also offer audits for social and email marketing as well. So that's what I'm currently offering now. But obviously, we'll get into a little bit more of the past 13 years and where I've been in order to get here today.
For sure. And I know, after I found you on the podcast guest platform and I went to your website, one of the things that just struck me right away was that you have done a lot of work for Peter Diamandis and the X Prize in the past. And for anybody, if you don't know who Peter Diamandis is or have never heard of X Prize, just Google X Prize. They have done some amazing stuff, and of course, because I know Peter, and I remember when I reached out to you, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool that you worked for Peter, because I know Peter, and I've got an amazing story I want to share with you about Peter when you and I get to talk. But then when we talked, and you told me about here's some of the real results that came from that. Grace, I was blown away. I'm like, wow. I was like, man, you have an amazing skill set. And so what I want to do is, yeah, I mean, talk a little bit about whether you want to talk about Peter and X Prize or even any other clients that you've served, whatever feels right to just kind of like give an idea of like some of the results that you've been able to get for some people in your life that you've served.
Absolutely. I think X Prize is a great place to start because audits was such a big part of that. I think
Okay.
that's where I found my passion for audits, is because there hasn't been a role or a client that I haven't done an audit for, because it's so important in how I strategize and implement for whether you're e-commerce or nonprofit. But when I went freelance originally in 2020, right when COVID hit, um, long story short, an old manager of mine put me in touch with Al Berry, who was kind of leading the marketing for X Prize. So I was hired on by Green Rock Agency based in London with the initiative to focus on X Prize. So when I came on board with X Prize, I did a full on audit of all of their social channels and proposed a completely new strategy for all social media channels, email marketing, as well as tone of voice and copy. And then we completely redid their UTM tracking, because obviously you have investors donating millions of dollars. We really needed to solidify that tracking and make sure that data was as accurate as possible. So about 8 months in, I did an overall audit of, okay, a re-audit, as you would call it, to see where we got after implementing all the strategy changes. And we had engagement up by 104%. We had impressions up across all channels by 122%. We had sessions via social up by 107%. But the two that I'm going to highlight are Instagram and Twitter. So
Okay.
we kind of redid their Instagram strategy. We saw sessions via Instagram up by 195%. Now, they had stopped using Twitter before I came on board. And after doing the audit and knowing the platform personally myself, this was before Elon had purchased Twitter. But so knowing that platform and seeing the data, I thought this is a channel we need to be on and we need to be utilizing on it. 870% increase in sessions via Twitter just by getting back
Wow.
on there.
Wow.
Fast forward 8 months, just after I'd completed this audit, Elon Musk donated 100 million towards the X Prize carbon removal project. And would you, luck be have it, Twitter was the only platform we were able to communicate with him on. He ended up retweeting some copy that I wrote for X Prize to 52 million followers at the time, and we were able to really engage with him on that platform. So that 870% that was originally, before he came on board, became infinite for us, because that platform was the only way to interact with him. So that was a massive win that went beyond, 1,000%. It's priceless really to have that, platform be of use. So that's kind of one example with X Prize. And obviously I oversaw the entire launch for the carbon removal project, along with, running some paid ads and taking over some of the previous prizes like Save the Rainforest and all of these really great socially incentivized prizes. So that's one of the most probably projects I'm most proud of, because the amount of impact, I think the prize lasts about 5 years. And even if they don't accomplish the goal that they've set out to, they will make a significant impact on the carbon footprint. So it's super exciting. Go check it out. Anousheh Ansari, who is the first woman to go to the International Space Station, she is the co-founder with Peter Diamandis. So they are some really great people to follow and see what they're doing. I would backpedal and say that actually Ben Cheston, who was my manager first B2B gig at Hi Mom Said Dad in London, he's the one that put me in touch and referred me to Al Berry that I worked with at X Prize. So it's just funny because that B2B role at Hi Mom Said Dad was where I started doing audits. And it was really just to prove the value of my work to the CEO of the company. This was 13 years ago when QR scan codes were just coming out. We hadn't figured out quite how to use them. So the power of social still wasn't really fully understood by B2B yet.
Okay.
So that's where, Ben Cheston said, we've got to start doing reports to really show the value. And that's from then on, I never stopped reporting. moving on into Silk Fred, I was there for 4 years. We were doing weekly reports, monthly reports because of the amount of revenue that was going, the amount of investments going into PPC. You know, we had to keep a close eye on it. So a lot of auditing there on a weekly and monthly basis. I can go into that on a whole nother spiel of how we made impact there. But I think the next kind of company that I would focus on would be Myova. They are a purpose-driven brand. I think just to answer your question of what inspires me is working with purpose-driven brands. X Prize is a great example. Myova is another great example. If you head to myova.com and just read the about of how and why she founded that company, it will move you to tears. And so I always say that if I'm working for a company that has purpose, it makes marketing easy, because it is easy to sell something that you can stand behind with your values. So that's what inspires me, is making an impact with purpose-driven companies. And for Myova, same thing. We did monthly audits for them. And when I came on board, we re-strategized email and we re-strategized social. And just after a few months, we saw revenue up by 200%. We saw conversion rate up by 81%. We saw email revenue up by 224%. And, you know, that was after just deep diving into PPC results, into Instagram results of what colors that the audience engaged with most. And so we applied those findings to a completely new email template, a completely new email strategy. We saw immediate, you know, revenue impact on that. And I really enjoyed working with that company for the time that I did. So that's another great example of audits, but I have plenty more.
Well, man, that's pretty phenomenal. And that was a brilliant job of setting some context, Grace. I mean, I got to hand it to you. I mean, anybody who, if they are in the B2B space and after hearing all that you just shared, if their antenna didn't go up thinking to themselves, man, maybe a conversation with Grace might be valuable, then we got to make sure they got a pulse right now. So that was absolutely brilliant, Grace. And so,
thank you.
Okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set here, and you know, some of Grace's brilliance is abundantly clear, that like this girl is a rock star at doing what she does. And so we'll switch gears here a little bit, and you've mentioned some names already, but I want to go and do a little bit more, like, deeper dive on this relationship piece. And so what I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of our listeners. So Grace, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm really excited to do a little bit deeper dive and go into this topic of relationships with you.
Yeah, and it's a great topic because, you know, networking is such an important part of what I do. And it's my favorite part of what I do, meeting people and building relationships. And that's part of the reason I'm so passionate about being a nomad and having an international life, is because of all of the amazing people I've met, you know, from all over the world. And it makes the big world feel very small, which is comforting sometimes. I think from a personal standpoint, not many people know the real reason I moved to London, and it was initially for love. So it didn't work out, but it was the push to shove that I needed. And I've met a lot of women over the years who have moved overseas for love, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But wholeheartedly, that decision that I made to move, it did not work out with the person, but it changed my entire life. The minute I stepped into London, I expanded my world on a global view. I found a huge part of myself. I was in my early 20s, you know, getting to know who I was. And I also decided to go back to university. I had taken 2 years off just to work due to personal reasons. Had I not taken those 2 years off and moved overseas and studied abroad in London, digital marketing wouldn't have even been an option to study in university. So I think that jump to London that I had was detrimental in my life. Huge, huge change, changed everything. And then I would say, you know, that move then expanded, you know, my network and my horizons. And one of my best friends to this day, who was living in London, she connected me with Hi Mom Said Dad, and was my first opportunity to build a social media strategy from the ground up. And I made a huge impact. I had a great time. I worked with incredible brands, Cadbury, Carling, Oxium, you name it. And that leads me to Ben Cheston, because I hope I'm going to have to share this episode with him. I think he made a bigger impact on the way my career unfolded, probably more than he knows. And there is something he said to me when he became my manager that stuck with me forever. And it was, "You're meant to be in e-commerce." And that, that it just blows my mind, because that comes full circle now, 13 years later. That's how I decided that always stuck with me, that I was meant to be in e-commerce. And if you see the way I write, it does feel very e-commerce. So not that I can't shift to B2B, but that's where I have the most fun, is in e-commerce writing and e-commerce data and all that kind of stuff. Later on, you know, after Ben wasn't my manager anymore and I've moved on, he was the person who connected me with Al Berry and referred me to X Prize. So I just want to give a shout out to Ben Cheston. Thank you for being a great manager back in the day, and just being a great networker for me. And, you know, that advice stuck with me forever. There have been so many people in my life who have made an impact. I think one of my best friends, Ella Nash Velasco, she's a very well-known photographer in London. She connected me with the job at Silkfred, and I worked with Emma Watkinson, who's the CEO and founder of Silkfred, and the head of marketing, Rob Lydiard. And I think working with them for 4 years was definitely made a huge impact in my career. I think Emma, you know, we took the company to a 5 times growth within those 4 years. So working alongside Rob to expand that PPC effort. Emma and Rob were really good at allowing us to thrive. You know, they threw me into email marketing the first year, and I managed that, and I doubled revenue and doubled subscribers. I helped the company define their tone of voice in a huge way. So I think definitely a shout out to Emma and Rob and Ella, and my manager Jean there as well. Just during those 4 years, I learned so much, and the team there was so amazing. It was really fun to be a part of that. I have some friends still there, you know, from that time of my life that I will be friends with forever. So yeah. And then of course, Al Berry, who I worked with at X Prize. He was just an incredible manager who really values marketing. And I think that he made a huge impact in my career as well. There's so many people, but those are the ones that come to mind first.
Yeah, yeah. So if you mentioned a number of people here, Grace, and so I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm sure you'll be able to come up with a number of examples to this. I'm just going to challenge you. You know, the first thing that comes top of mind for you. So if you look at all of these relationships that you've had, and you look at yourself, and let's look to an example where you personally got to make a really big impact, and you also know, hands down, that would have never happened if not for your relationship with whoever that was.
I think that would be Ella Nash
Okay.
Velasco, my best friend, still to this day. I met her just kind of in passing through mutual friends, and her values, and she was a big traveler. I really just connected with her, and I just thought, I've got to be friends with you. And we started collaborating on creative projects. She was selling clothes on ASOS Marketplace. So she took my blog photos in exchange for modeling for her ASOS Marketplace. And
Okay.
she was the one, you know, during that time, I was doing blogging while working in B2B with the goal to get into digital marketing fashion. That was a big goal for me. And Ella was the person who really opened that door for me. She was a photographer at Silkfred, and Emma had been telling her how she needed a digital marketer. So, you know, I got that cover letter together, put my life and soul into it, heart and soul into it, And, thanks to that referral and that cover letter, I was able to get an interview with Emma, and the rest is history. So I have to give a shout out to Ella for that one.
That is awesome. And you know what a testament that is to the power of relationships, which, I mean, that's what this podcast is all about. And I love the fact that you're like, oh, and I might even have to share this interview with Ben and stuff, because I don't know that he knows that I've ever talked about him this way. And it's really cool to come to those realizations. And because I'll tell you, that's happened a lot over the last couple of years of doing interviews with this podcast, is that the folks that I've interviewed have been like, Kev, can I get the recording of that? Because I do want to share that with some of the folks that I talked about, and I really want them to know how much I think of them and how much I appreciate them. One thing I have definitely learned over the years is that no matter how successful somebody is, no matter how great things look from the outside looking in, there's not a person on this earth that gets too much appreciation, and it just means so much when we just actively appreciate people. It means so much to them. And we just, you want to make an impact, give people some genuine appreciation. It goes so dang far. And so yeah, I'll make sure you get the recording so you can share this with anybody you want to share it with, Grace. So
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, okay. So at this point, I know there are people listening to this going, dang, Kev, Grace is amazing. I love the way she shows up, and like, man, I think I would like to learn more about what she's doing, and how can they do that? Is there any websites, any resources that we can share with them so they can like follow up more if they want to with you, Grace?
Absolutely. So my LinkedIn is linkedin.com/Grace Clemens. My website is www.gracieclemens, GraciecClemens.com, gracieclemens.com. You can find it on my LinkedIn. You can find it on my Instagram. And there's just a link right on top that says book an audit. You can check out my services as well if you're interested in consultancy or strategy specifically. But you can go right ahead and book yourself a free 15-minute audit, or you could go right ahead and get a social media one or an email one. That's the best way to find me. My marketing agency website will be launching soon. It's not quite there yet, still in the development phase, but I will be sure to announce that on LinkedIn as soon as it's live.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that we include those links with the show notes for the podcast and stuff too. And so Grace, any last thing you feel compelled to share before we call it a wrap?
I just have had so much fun. I really do think that the point you've made about the power of marketing and networking and the importance in that. So I guess I would just close it out by saying thank you to my network and all of the amazing people in it, including yourself. The value of relationships and the role they play on my life are next to none. So I guess I would close it out by saying thank you to everyone who supports me and all the clients I've worked with, now, in the future, and in the past. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Well, Grace, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. I am really excited to get this interview out because I know it's going to be really impactful for a lot of other entrepreneurs and founders and CEOs. And so thanks so much again. Really appreciate you.
Thank you too. Speak soon.